What time is it? It's hero time. That's right. Hey guys, sorry, running a little behind today. Had some real life stuff. But we are back doing another Project Feline check-in stream. How is everybody? Good evening, guys. Sorry that we're starting so late, but better late than never. This will be probably a shorter one though. But I've been cooking. Okay, I'm cooking every week. I say that every week, and it's true. We good? Awesome. I don't know what time it would be for you guys. I think, according to my analytics, I've been trying to broaden this, but for whatever reason, everything I do, it's like the analytics are dominated by people in California. I've been trying to diversify and have stuff like seen in more areas than California, but it seems like no matter what I do, nobody cares except California. So I have to kind of play to their time zone, which is a bit hard because I'm on the other side of the planet, but I'm trying. Hello, Cosmic. Yes, my fellow Nutrigrain enthusiasts. Not in California. Oh, that's great. We got one guy that is not in California. That brings joy to my heart. All right. So, that's fantastic. There's me and then that guy. We're the only people on Earth not in California. So, I guess we'll get into things. So I've been doing some texturing. Very fun. This is how the lab is shaping up. Let me pick a cooler part of the level to show you. This is how the lab is shaping up with custom textures now. They're not finished. They're a bit rough around the edges still. But they're coming along. This is like the first time I've done hand-drawn textures in years. So it's been an experience to try and figure it out. And there's a lot to it, actually, that I want to talk about. But I'm just sort of doing a fly-through with the camera here to show you kind of how it looks. This little area here is probably my favorite, just with the way it's lit. Got this nice soft lighting here with I don't know, it's something about the color scheme, the detail, whatever combination it is. It's pretty nice. Zorro asks, how's the game going? Well, it's going. It's going slowly, but I'm trying to get it going the best I can. This is what I was able to do this week in terms of direct work on the game. I did some bug fixes as well with the health system, which I can't remember if I've shown you guys or not. I might as well show it off later anyway. Because there's a lot of like weird little gameplay things that are kind of messed up. Because my current goal, I need to get a demo out, and I want to do that this year. So part of my week has been researching demos of other games and doing my texturing for my demo and doing little bug fixes, working on the video for the devlog of Gabi's model, and other stuff I can't talk about. Smooth Brain Dev, very cool name. The real question, where is the game going? Well, that is a good question indeed. I can't really tell you where, but I can show you how I can show you how the game is like moving. The game, wherever it's going to be going in style like this. It's going to be going flipping around. It's going to be going the coolest way possible. It's not going to be going the boringest way possible. As to where it'll end up, I could tell you, but I'm not going to. There's because I've also been doing a lot of stuff in terms of writing lately, for the Le Plot, which I really want to tell you guys about, but I can't do it. I can't tell you because it's a spoiler. But maybe I can try to talk about it in a roundabout way in terms of like how I'm like finding better ideas for things. And anyway, I don't know. It's exciting, but I can't like go into specifics for it. But yeah, in terms of like, to give you a big picture idea on where I would like it to go once the demo is there, is I would like it to be able to go to a sort of, I want it to feel like a complete start to end 2000s platformer adventure. It doesn't mean it's going to be massive. It doesn't mean it's going to be a 40-hour game or anything. I don't think that's really feasible anyway. But there was a period earlier in development where I had this concept in my head of like, I have to make the game like long. because that's what everyone says they want. And then I realized that that's kind of nonsense. So I remember having a very big crisis of where is the game going, because I couldn't come up with any idea that would justify 40 hours of gameplay or whatever. But thinking about it that way was just hell, literally. That was like the biggest development hell moment ever, where it's like, how do we make big levels? I don't know. We'll change the entire game design to make small levels, and then we'll like waste your time in the small levels to make the game longer. And yeah, I've got devlogs and all that stuff. For some of you might have seen them. I think one of them is titled like "Escaping Development Hell" or something like that. But it's gonna be yeah, it is basically like we had a big period of that. That might have been a year or two ago. And then I realized, oh, actually, that's lame. I'm just going to do whatever. I don't care how long it is. And then it just so happened, even just me messing around, that was like, what, 2 minutes, right? Now, me a year or two ago would have looked at that and went, oh, it's only 2 minutes. I can't do that. Everyone's going to refund the game. But I don't really care anymore. I thought that was a fun 2 minutes. And then you can just kind of replay the stages to get better at them. And that's going to be where the playtime comes from. And I think there is because I've seen this thing like in game development talked about, where everyone's like obsessing over like what's the conversion metric? It's like they treat it like goddamn watch time on YouTube or something. They treat it like being a YouTuber, and it always just makes the design bad somehow, and I can't explain exactly why, but it feels like the best adjective I can use to describe it is that it feels soy, and I can't really explain why it feels soy, but it just does. And it feels insecure. That's what it is. That's the better word. It feels like afraid of like, oh, we gotta get the players' attention. What are we gonna do? And it's like, I know, we'll give them like armor upgrades or whatever, or some pointless feature that I don't like, me as a player wouldn't care about. Now, I'm a very picky guy. I'm very selective about the games I play, but I think in general, if I think something a waste of time, most people probably would agree, I think. So since like going through that phase, it's now at the point where I then happened to stumble across a method of making the maps long and cheap, which was the thing I was trying to find out the whole time. So that means basically that, because one of the big fears was that how do you make levels longer? And the way I was doing it was I was doing the Unreal kit bash method, which is not designed for this kind of level design. Like, you can't make 2-kilometer long maps with kit bashing. I've tried it. You can't do it. You could try, but it's bad. It's just, it feels bad. It feels soy. I hate it. So doing it in Trench Broom instead, which is, I discovered that about a month or so ago, and that's how I made this level out. But that phase was kind of more about feeling out how to block out geometry and stuff, and there's still a bit I have to do with this level, because you'll probably notice that it does feel a little empty. But with the textures on it, though, I don't know if I have a picture from the other week, or footage from the other week of how it was looking. I'll see if I can get, I think it might be on my Twitter or something, or Instagram. I think I have a clip of what the level was looking like before I put these textures on it. Also, what is it with Twitter? And it's like, if I open it, unless I'm logged in, it doesn't show me all the tweets. Oh, okay, here we go. So there was this version. Oh, that's way too, can I just, yeah. You guys can see that, right? So this was a previous iteration of this level with, this was the kit bash way, and I paid a professional to do this. And if you have an eye, you'll probably notice lots of issues. Like the fact that trim sheets are being used for everything. And the color scheme is not very, I don't know, the vibe is off. Then I had a second attempt, which is, this is the current level geometry where I built it in Trench Broom. And that was with stock textures that looked like hand-painted stock textures I licensed from somewhere else. And that was better, but then the vibe was still a bit off, and I was like, what if I painted my own and made this a bit better? So that's what I ended up. That's sort of what I've been lately. I've been just trying to make this level, because this is going to be the demo level that sort of represents the level design ethos of the game and the aesthetic of the game. And I guess we'll talk a bit about the texturing because that's what I've been mostly focused on lately. So I've hand done all of these that you see. So I've got a floor tile going on, a wall tile, and some basic trims like these. Now, these I want to make these a little better, but at the moment they kind of get the vibe across, and I think they're pretty cool. I enjoy them. I did a lot of, well, where should I begin? I guess I'll open the Photoshop files and show you guys how these looked. What did you use to paint them? I used Photoshop, my guy. Look, so when I was learning 3D art years ago, I went to some like institute where they're supposed to teach you like all the AAA techniques or whatever. And it was lame and a waste of time because the way I would have been taught to make floor tiles like this, the way they teach it is you got to open ZBrush, which already, no, I'm not opening ZBrush, but it's like you got to open ZBrush, and then you have to sculpt in the tiles, and then you have to bake the normal map as a high poly sculpt, and then you have to project it on a plane, and then you have to open Substance Designer. And like all of this software, by the way, is expensive. Like it all costs like, how much is ZBrush? I don't know, but it's not free, okay? And it's like, you then got to open freaking like Adobe Substance Designer or whatever, and then you have to like use smart materials, and it's just like, oh my god, man, like I don't want to. I'm just gonna draw it, okay? Shut up. I'm just gonna draw them. I don't want to deal with all this smart material nonsense. So that's what I did. Thanks so much.
All of this.
Imp Sleepy Strings.
Dude, that's impressive.
It says you are a member for 2 months. Thanks so much. All of this hand painted. That's right. So let me show you all of them because I've got a few. Now, I want to have a few more. I've only got 5 at the moment, and they're varying in quality. Let me turn off a pattern preview. So this is the floor. And now the trick here, because one of the reasons ZBrush is $400. Yeah, no thank you, man. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing ZBrush. Smooth Brain Dev says soy is exactly the word. Yeah, see, like, I'm trying to think if there's like a more esoteric word for it, a more sophisticated word, but soy kind of is, like, I don't know. Whenever I think of any AAA, like, software bloat, whatever, whenever it's like you need to over sculpt everything, I don't know. All of it just seems, it gives me like, I can feel the soy chemicals in my brain going off. And it's like, I don't want to do that. And I've put myself in that position before. When I was making the Skyport level, I'll open that up because I still have it. I had the soy in my veins. I could feel it. And this sent me, dude, this whole idea of like, it's a good thing to know, a little side tangent. It's really good. I think I've learned it's very they don't teach this at game dev school, okay? But I think it's very valuable to know and to pick up on when you're making a soy decision or not. I find that that's a skill you need to develop because it saves you from doing things the wrong way so many times. So this level, for instance, this is a soy level, okay? And what I mean by that is, firstly, I didn't know anything about design. So you can see it looks pretty random, haphazard, random, like object generate. It looks like it was done with procedural generation. And that's the funny thing, is that I wasn't even good enough to do procedural generation at this point. So I had actually hand placed all of these groups of crates. So that was the first thing where it's like I could feel the soy chemicals in my veins, but I didn't know how to point it out at the time. I thought it's like, well, that's how you design levels. I guess that's how it's done. And I'm like, man, I'm really not enjoying this, but I guess that's how it's done. And then when it came to these crates, because I was too lazy to make other geometry, because I hand placed everything, I'm like, oh, screw it. I'm only going to make 4 models and just make the entire stage out of that. And I thought that was like a design by simplicity thing, but that's probably the soy way of doing it because it looks ugly and the shipping crates look ugly. Like the individual models look ugly, and then they look ugly when put together like this. So you'll notice that with these shipping crates, you can tell that it's been baked from a high poly sculpt. Because I actually did do a high poly version of it, and then I made a box version and then baked on the normal map. But it just looks unattractive. Like the bezels all look like they have bleed on them and everything. Like the color bleed, and the actual sides of the rivets, they don't look structurally sound. Like there's meant... If I was to do this now, I wouldn't do it with a normal map. I would just texture in these lines in Photoshop. And it would need some kind of gradient on the top here for the corner. But I haven't put that there because I didn't know how to do that. And it looks like a plastic shipping crate as a result. And then I'm like, oh, I'll put some specular on it to save it. It'll look better if I put specular on it, right? And it's like, does it though? Like, I look at it now, and it's like, but does it actually look better with just specular on it? Well, the better question, sorry, isn't that does it look better? It's like, if I took a picture of this, would people think it's from a mid-2000s JetX airing anime? And I look at it now, and the answer is hell no. This looks like an amateur 3D artist, and that's because that's what I was. I guess I still kind of am a bit, but I was way more amateur at this point. And, like, the level... You can feel the soy, can't you? You can look at the layout of everything, and you can feel the soy. You can feel the soylent. Man, that's a great adjective. I'm going to keep using that, actually, because whenever I say it, it feels like the right word. Like, yeah, you see here I've put in... Oh, if I just add specular, it'll make it better. It'll hide my bad craftsmanship if I put specular on it. It's like, no, it just looks it just looks bad. It looks like a low-res normal map. Oh my god. This is making me laugh. God, what was I thinking, man? What the hell was Raymond cooking back then? What was bro doing? Anyway, sorry, this is actually making me laugh and how bad it is. So let's I gotta look away from the soy for a second. I gotta look at... So, in contrast, this new thing, the new lab, I've done completely without any soylent. It's all just raw meat, okay? All water, milk, and meat. That's all this is. The spiritual equivalent of that. So there's no normal maps, no specular, no metallic, no anything. This is 100% diffuse shading only. Diffuse shading only. None of that PBR crap. We don't want any of that PBR stuff. This is 100% diffuse. And the lighting, again, the lighting hasn't been updated, so the lighting doesn't quite do it justice yet. But, I don't know, to me this looks way more cohesive and to the style, and less soy, most importantly. Yeah, this is... Yes, Gus. This is made with 100% protein, Nutrigrain. None of that soy. This is just raw Nutrigrain stuff. No milk, no soylent, no nothing. Containers in ZZZ are painted, and they use good textures. I don't know what that is. Is that a sleeping IP, ZZ? Yeah, I might have to adjust it for the diagonal. I mean, maybe. I think I just need to adjust the placement of the trims. And I need to stretch the wall to go down. I think that might be what I have to do. Because I can actually... I've warped the texture on this trim, but I haven't done it on the wall. So I'll have to go in and fix that at some point. But yeah, at the moment, I haven't really touched the level geo. I'm just remapping textures and testing for color. And I guess this brings us back to the texturing. So I'll show you the first one I did was this wall. So this is what... Yeah, you don't need frickin' Substance Designer and frickin' ZBrush. You don't need that to just do this. Another cool fact is that this wall is 256 pixels across in size. This is not even a 1K texture, guys. Everyone now is all saying, well, you gotta have 4K everything. You gotta have 2K normal maps and then resize it to 1 or whatever. I don't care. You don't need 1K. You just need... This is like a quarter of 1K. This is not even 512. This is 256. And I don't know if any of you noticed that. Like, 100% real. Did any of you freaking notice that this is not a 1K texture? This is a quarter of a 1K texture. I bet none of you noticed that. Next video idea, shedding the soy. That's actually a great title. Oh my goodness. Well, that's basically, for the last like 6 months or so, or a year, that's basically been what I've been doing. Is that throughout the development up until that point, because I had all of these soy ideas about game development, and that's why I got so flustered and stuck on everything. And it's been a big process of unlearning the institutional knowledge and, yeah, shedding the soy, getting myself out of this soy cocoon and going, yeah, screw it. 256 textures, no normal maps diffuse. Let's go. So this floor is no normal map on the floor, but it looks bumpy, but I didn't need a normal map to do that. And what is that? Sorry, I don't know what that was. Freaking government helicopters. They're coming for me now. They go, no, you can't use... He's spreading the forbidden knowledge. And they're coming for me now. That you can actually make a game without 1K textures. But, soy stock's decreasing by the minute. Indeed. But, yeah, so all of, like, this little thing with the wall... Well, I'll show you how I was able to fake these effects without a normal map or anything. Because it all comes down to traditional... Whoa, I know, traditional painting techniques. So I've actually been studying a lot of things from like oil painters, and I don't even know what the name of it is, but I was watching this video about oil painting and color and videos about value and all this stuff. So I'll break it down. So to do this texture, well, I've got a few variations here. So the first attempt looked like this. And it was like okay-ish, but it was a bit too blue. The second attempt was a bit more high contrast, but I think I kind of overdid the specular a little bit. The third attempt was way more washed out without the overdone specular. The fourth iteration was a bit more saturated. And then the fifth iteration was just a bit brighter, because I just wanted to kind of get the value right. And this is where it gets kind of tricky, because I've noticed this, because I've been doing like digital art for a while, just drawing Gabi in Photoshop and stuff. But it's the way I'm having to learn it to do environment textures. It's the stuff that also helps me with just normal drawing. And one thing I always used to get really annoyed by is knowing what color to pick. Because the whole thing with this level, part of the reason why you guys say that it looks better and that it looks more moody has nothing to do with the texture detail. It has everything to do with the color choice. And that instead of just using random textures, I just like picked colors first. So last week you would have seen I just had flat colored tiles on everything to get a sense of color. And then now I'm adding in the details. But it's all about, I know that there is a system to knowing where to put dark colors, where to put light colors, and what hues to pick out. So to give you an idea on where I started in terms of what to pick, because it's very easy to pick the wrong colors, as it would turn out. Now, I had a tab open. So for inspiration, I was looking at pictures like this, and like this. So it's the kind of Y2K New Millennium aesthetic. And I remember some of you guys in chat last week said something about bring back the Y2K Aqua aesthetic or something like that. Because I picked the colors kind of randomly at first, and I just picked blues and analogous shades of blue. And then I saw some of you guys say like, oh, we got to bring back the aqua palette. And I thought, actually, that sounds like a cool idea. So I don't know if this is exactly what the look people were talking about, but I thought this looked pretty cool. And the other reference I was looking at was the Half-Life Black... Let me type it in. I was looking at the Black Mesa lab. And... this was from Half-Life 1, I think. I was looking at this first, but it does feel a bit contemporary. And this was like... the difference between my one and this is that this obviously is a bit more green in palette, but it has that medical feel to it and everything. But of course, I didn't just want to copy Half-Life and just do a Half-Life level. But I thought, what's my spin I could put on to make it interesting? And eventually, I'm going to get to doing the props. But I thought, well, if I could put my own spin on just the color, because I find blue is more attractive personally. If you go and look at my channel and my ArtStation or whatever, you'll notice that I like using blue. It's like one of my favorite colors. I tend not to use green that much. And I thought, well, what if I took this Half-Life idea of laboratory and like use this as a reference for like level of detail, like how detailed patterns and wall textures should be, but then give it like a Y2K Millennium flavor to make it a bit more unique. So the result was something where you can actually notice that the wall tiles and trims, in terms of what's actually on them, is quite similar to the Half-Life level. Like the walls, I think this might have been an accident. It's like, I just kind of did it freehand, but you'll notice that the walls actually kind of have the same sort of pattern on them. But my walls, they have a bit more, they have the structural beam going through the middle, and they're a different color. And it makes it feel like a different environment. So the thing that's different, that gives me a different vibe, is that this laboratory feels like it would exist in, like, I don't know if you guys, this is a bit of a weirdly specific to me thing, but about 20 years ago, or 30 years ago or something, because my dad was like a government scientist at one point, and I remember one time, maybe I did this multiple times, but I do remember a specific time when I might have been about 5 years old. He took me to his office in the department he was in. And it kind of looked a lot like, in terms of the props, it looked a lot like this, but the color scheme was a lot more 70s, because that's when the building had been made. So the floors were like this ugly kind of, I don't know what texture you'd even call it, but it was like a classroom floor. And then all of the walls were like brown and whatever. And this environment here kind of reminds me of like a cleaner version of that with more metal. But it feels still kind of like a 2000s contemporary. Whereas what this gives me the feeling of futurism. Whereas this is sort of leaning into it a little, but it's still very much in the present. But this feels more thinking ahead in the future type thing. So I thought, for my game, I do want it to have that hint of futurism to it. And I don't know, blue and chrome feels more futuristic, I guess. So I kind of tried to, mix that into my palette. And it kind of gives it a more futuristic feeling than the Half-Life one, in my opinion. But I don't know, you guys... Bro's dad worked for Blackman. Yes, my dad was Gordon Freeman. That's right. I have no idea what the plot of Half-Life is. I've only played the first 5 minutes of the game just to look at that level, and I haven't progressed it at all. So I'm sorry, I don't know what Gordon Freeman does in the game. But if he saves the world or something, that'd be pretty cool. Cybershell says, looks fresh. Thank you. Thank you so much. The aesthetic makes me feel alive. Oh, man, I'm glad. It does, me too, okay? It makes me feel alive as well. And it's like, I don't want to pick drab, boring colors that make me feel bored. I want to make colors that excite me. And I think the choice, because there is a degree to which because the ultimate question for me the last week working on this has been trying to, because I know that there is to bring it back to the earlier topic, there's a soy option and the right option. And it's like, I know that even with color choice, you can pick soy colors that are bad. And it's like, the biggest thing, it's like, before I start adding detail, what is the righteous color choice and the righteous amount of detail? Like and it's not that there's like an objectively correct result, but there is a correct attitude and a correct reasoning. And the soy reasoning is like no reason. And it's like, I have to, the insecure reason where it's like, I have to force this to make it look interesting. I have to, the YouTube video told me I have to pick a contrasting color and an analogous one. So I'll pick two random that I don't really feel any affinity towards because the tutorial told me. And it's like, that's the wrong attitude of picking stuff, even if it's the right result or something. So there's a degree to which when picking out things, it has to be subjectively interesting, but then it has to be put together objectively well. And that's kind of like something I've been picking up on as I've been doing this, is that yes, you could do this, because I did try another palette the other week. I don't know if I have the picture of it on hand. But the other week I had the gray, orange, and green. And those colors were cool, but it didn't feel right subjectively. Now, I could have made those colors work anyway and used like sort of aqua, green, and orange. I could have done that, and it would have been technically a correct thing because the colors go by the color wheel or whatever. It would have been correct, but there's a subjective element too, where it's like, yes, that would have worked, but is there another subjective choice that's more exciting? And that's kind of why I landed on the Y2K, leading into that for this locale. It's because the orange and the green was like, it was inspired by this, which is cool, but this is more cool for me. But what will be more cool to you is going to be subjective, and you can't have someone else tell you that. It has to be like what you reckon. So to someone else, they might be more excited by greens and teals, and then they would make a cooler level because those have a subjective value to the person making it that might exceed. Like maybe the whoever made this, or if you were to make something like this, and if you're not really into this style, you would probably have a better time doing this sort of thing, and you would make this cooler by virtue of you having a subjective affinity for it. And I think that's an important ingredient. I think it's really hard to make anything that you're not at least subjectively fond of to some degree, because then it's just that's soy. You know, that's where it gets like it's just hell, and you don't want to do that. So anyway, so that's with the colors, and I was able to pick out these shades. And well, yeah. Then the tricky thing is, okay, once you know generally what palette you want, how do you pick the right shades? How do you pick how light things are? How do you pick how saturated things are? And that's where it gets kind of complicated, because there are right and wrong ways as well. And it's more like you should be able to pick these with some kind of reason. Like, for instance, the fact that the wall is light and this beam is dark, and that compared to the floor, it's darker. Like, that isn't an accident. Like, that is a choice I've made, but I didn't do that randomly. So I've been having to do lots of like learning and relearning of art fundamentals to know how color values work and whatever. So when I did this, I did it in grayscale first, and I just did the color blocks in grayscale, and then I went in later and picked the right hues to put in here. Now, to pick hues, because then you have the other problem. There's so many problems, and a lot of this is just because of how limitless software is now. Because I've got these here color pickers, and I can change the hue of these. But you notice how you get like unlimited options, and you could pick anything. So that's bad. You don't want to be able to pick everything, because there is maybe 5 options that would be the right one, and every other one is the wrong one. Like, this shade of pink for this wall is wrong because it isn't thoughtful. There's no considered reason why this... And also, if I was to pick something like orange or whatever, like, this is the wrong hue. Like, because there's the color theory element too. Or if I bring up the... I don't know if this will be visible to you guys. There is a color wheel in Photoshop like this. And it's like, typically... there is a sensible way to pick colors on this wheel. You know, you either pick opposing colors, like cyan and red, or green and whatever. Like, you can pick complementary like that. There's triadic schemes. So in my case, I'm using an analogous palette, which is where you just pick colors that are similar in the spectrum. So they're kind of next to each other on the color wheel. So you'll notice with a lot of my textures that darker things, I've got them more to the purple shade, whereas lighter things I've got more to the teal shade. But they're not really leaving the spectrum of the color wheel. And then the only thing that's changing is the value and the vibrance. And then, well, even then, when you just limit yourself to those, there's still a lot of options in this triangle of what shade and what saturation. And that's where I was getting flustered, because I didn't want to just pick random whatever. I wanted to have a reasonable choice. And, you know, that was like subjectively appealing, and that, you know, it wasn't just a random thing. So I was looking up more stuff about color, and I came across this little interesting discovery. Oh, I just closed the tab. Sorry, hold on, let me get it open. Let me get it open. I was just trying to click on it and I clicked the X by accident. God. Now I don't know if I'll stick with this, but one thing that was really annoying is, well, yeah, you have way too many choices. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever tried editing documents in like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. I don't know how many of you have done that, but you'll notice in PowerPoint or any of the, like, can I get like something like that open right now? I'll get PowerPoint open. And I'm going to use PowerPoint as an example because when I first learned digital art and how to draw stuff, I actually did it in PowerPoint. So I used to draw renders of Gabi. You guys might actually, it's on one of my devlogs. It's devlog 12, where I make Gabi's model for the first time, and I show this 2D render of Gabi that looks horrid from like 2009, and it was made in PowerPoint. But I'm bringing this up because PowerPoint doesn't have this problem, because it gives you a finite set of colors that are like reasonably chosen, where it's like, oh, if I want to pick the right blue, it's like, well, what feels right on this limited palette? And if you wanted to make the laboratory color palette in PowerPoint, you could do it like this. And look how fast this is. It's like, oh, if I want to pick a darker shade of something. And then if I wanted to do that that analogous palette thing like I was showing, I could like make certain bits tealer and certain bits bluer like this. And you notice how easy it is to just pick the right choices and that this looks good? Like, that's what I mean. When I say the right choice, I mean that it looks pleasing. The wrong choice would be like going into the freaking RGB picker and picking something random. But this has a finite amount of shades, and I like that. And when I was doing coloring in PowerPoint when I was like 10 years old, I enjoyed it because it was simple, and it was like, oh, I have a limited palette, and it's easier to just pick good choices. But Photoshop, because it's advanced, it has this problem where it doesn't have that. So my challenge has been, how do I enforce these limits on myself so that I don't make silly soy choices about my color? But Photoshop, I mean, there's probably a way to do it where I have a friend that does a lot of Photoshop stuff. He does a lot of icons and flags, and he was telling me about how he uses swatches, but the swatches it gives you are like kind of like, I can't really use this swatch. Like, this is like it's just the RGB primary colors. And then there's grayscale, and then there's these other ones. But none of these are what I want. So it's like, I have to make my own swatch if I want... Because I don't... Like, this has too many colors in it still that I don't... And they don't have shades and all that stuff. And the thing I like about PowerPoint's color picker is that it has shades of each color, which is also a thing, because there's the color hue along this axis, and then there's the shade. And I like that PowerPoint gives you limited hues and limited shades. But the swatches in Photoshop just give you limited colors, but it doesn't give you shades. You have to make those yourself. And then it's like, all right, well, how do I pick the right shades? And then I came across this thing. This is called the Munsell Color Wheel. Some of you might know it. I'm just learning about it for the first time, and it's pretty cool. Let me just minimize some of my tabs here so that I can see you guys there. Aren't there plenty of generators? I mean, yes, but they're just kind of random, and they don't have shades, and that's what I want. So I've used Adobe Color and stuff to try and pick... It's good for picking hues, but it doesn't give you a spectrum of shades. And when you're doing things like texturing, the Adobe Color whatever gives you 5 colors, which is a bit too few. And it's like... If you wanted to do these indents and stuff, it's like, well, what shade do you pick for those? And Adobe Color doesn't give you the right amount to make things like that possible and things like that. It's a little too limited. And anyway, I've tried it. I didn't really care for it too much. But this I really like. So this is like just some online tool. I guess it's maybe similar to what you're describing, but this is like more useful for me. This is like using Munsell colors, which is like a specific kind of... there's some mathematical notation to it. I don't really care too much about that stuff. But it basically has a reason why it has this. It has a reason why it picks certain shades for each color. And that's what I want. I don't really care what the reasoning is, but I need a reasoning of some kind. That's what I want. So the Munsell color wheel is a bit different to the traditional one. It lays out the colors a bit differently, and there's reasons why. Can't remember the exact reasons. But what I like is that what I was doing for the lab is that I picked out... you see how here it says, like, hue, 5 purple, or something like that. It's got 2.5 PB, 5 PB, 7.5 PB, 10 PB. And all of the color wheel are actually notated in degrees. So it's like 0 degrees, 5 degrees, or whatever. And then it changes the letter depending on what hue it is. So there's red, and then there's like yellow, and then there's yellow, red, red, yellow, and then green, yellow, green, blue, green. And I thought, this is cool because it's a limited... It has distinct names for each of them, which is cool. And then when you click on any of these, it has shades of them. Now, this has like applications in a lot of other areas beyond design. Apparently, this is used in geology and in physics for other reasons. But I'm not a physicist or geologist, so I don't really care. But all I do know is that I like that what I did was I picked for the lab, I picked 5 purple blue for like the middle color, and then I picked 2.5 for like lighter things, and then 7.5 for darker things. So you'll notice that the 7.5, it's leaning more into the purple, so it's 7.5 purple blue, and then the shades it gives you are more purple. Now at this point, this was sort of enough for me to eyeball out a shade that I liked. So I think I picked like this one for the wall, and I went, I want that one. And then for a darker color, I'll pick like 2 down and this. And then I just feel around for what feels good. But the reason I like this is because it's codified, and it isn't just a spectrum. It's like discrete shades. And it's grid-based, weirdly enough. And we've talked about grid-based design a few streams ago with the level design. And I really like this kind of grid systematized way of picking colors, because this is the same attitude I'm doing the level layouts with too. And with the actual texture layout itself is also grid-based. So if I turn my grid guides on, you'll actually notice that I've aligned each of these like creases to a part of the grid. I've split the texture up into quadrants. And I've done it aligned. So I haven't just put these randomly. I've put these aligned on a grid. And it just makes making decisions faster. Because you don't have to sit around and go, oh, well, should I make this 2 pixels higher or 2 pixels lower? Like, what's the right... And it's like, just put it on the grid. And that makes design problems go away. It picks things for you. And that's what I like. And that's what this sort of system with color does, is that it picks shades and colors for you. But not in an AI type of way. It picks it in like, here are the ones you should use, and then you get to pick what you want from there. And I like it because it reduces the decision fatigue and overwhelming choice you have with Photoshop and modern software. And like MS Paint probably doesn't have this problem, because I think MS Paint is sort of similar, where it only gives you shades. And now that I look at it, because I look at PowerPoint, and it's like, how did the guys that made PowerPoint pick these? You know, what was the logic behind picking these? And maybe they used a similar system. Maybe they picked it from the Munsell wheel. Maybe that's where they got it from. So I thought, that'd be kind of cool. But yeah, and this might all sound like it doesn't matter, and it's like, oh, you're being like over pedantic about color choice. But that's how you get the result that looks sensible. You know, that's when I showed you guys this first, all of you said it looks more cohesive immediately. And you might not think shades and color matter, but that's why you have that reaction. That's why your eyes are delighted and you feel like, whoa, that's where that comes from. It doesn't just come out of thin air. It doesn't come from the fact that I've made it look kind of Y2K-ish. That's part of it. But the reason why it doesn't look, I guess, what's the word? The reason it doesn't look off is because I've been at least a bit deliberate about what shade should the wall be, what shade should the floor be, and then what hue. So the hue does shift a little bit, where this tile, I did this one at 64 pixels, so I want to redo this with a bit more detail at some point, but I was just messing around with the 64 pixel trim. And this one is more purple. It's in the 7.5 purple blue, whereas the lighter ones is the 2.5 purple blue, so it's a bit bluer. And I just kind of felt it out and went, that feels like the right choice. And so that was sort of how I learned the Munsell color wheel. I think there is some like plugin that adds it to Photoshop, but I think it costs money, so I haven't bothered looking at it yet. I'm just using a web picker for the moment. But part of the reason that I think about that stuff is mainly because my main concern is that the color value, as in just the brightness, is correct. That's my main concern. So if I go to pattern preview real quick and look at this in black and white, my first concern with making any of these is like, is it too bright and is it too dark and is it too much contrast? Because if you get those wrong, then it's going to stick out like a sore thumb and the players will keep looking at the wall and not at the level design. So picking the right thing, it's like I try to pick the right grayscale values. However, when you go in and add color to it after the fact, it changes the color values. And some of you that are digital artists might have noticed this. I've noticed this for a while, but I didn't realize I had noticed this until this week. And that's if you pick... I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe it. The color wheel is actually a good example, and this triangle shape is a good example. Because the thing that's annoying is that the more saturated you make a color, the darker the color value gets. Sometimes. But not all the time. And different areas of the hue have lighter values. And that's the thing that is annoying, is because the HSB sliders here, you see how there's a brightness, hue, and saturation in the top? HSB. That's what I've been working in for this. And it's like, let's say I want the wall to be 75% bright. Like that. I want it to be 75%. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do all my grayscale values with the knowledge that the wall is going to be 75% and the trim is going to be 25% or something. But as you can see with this triangle shape, when you make it more saturated, like if I go 75 and then up the saturation, you see how it goes diagonally down? And then if I change it to 25, it actually makes the perceived brightness lower on red. I don't know if you guys can see that. The little preview here is very small, but it doesn't, even when you go straight across in the box, like, you know, actually, here's a good example. Because when you have it here at full brightness and you make it more saturated, this little box gets darker, even though the brightness is not getting darker, but it visibly looks darker. So there's that kind of stuff. And it's like, how does hue affect value? Because it does. And so you have to, I don't know the exact answer to this, but I've tried to be mindful of it a little. But ultimately, I don't know how to do those two independently from each other completely. Because then when you have shades of cyan, for instance, that all then changes, because then cyan at full saturation looks, when you have S and B at full, so it should be full brightness, red is going to look darker, even though the brightness is still at 100. So anyway, so that's like, there's little things like that I notice, and it's like, if I decide to make an area more saturated, it affects the value. That's basically what I'm saying. So it's a matter of then like picking, like, yeah, if I do it here with this color, and I change this to, instead of being a color fill, I change this to just being pass-through. You see what I mean here, where I can make it brighter, but if I make it more saturated, it gets darker. And anyway, so it's like, there's a certain way to treat those. I know that there is a way to do it, but I don't know the way. But it's something I'm now aware of, at least, which I wasn't before. And a lot of traditional 2000s texturers have sort of got their workarounds for this sort of thing as well. So for instance, one way I did solve that and not have to think about it was when I was doing the seams and the textures. So these are all on separate layers. I've got a layer for some dodge and burn, and I've done this non-destructively as well, because I think someone last week mentioned that I shouldn't do dodge and burn on the base texture itself. So I've got the color on its own layer, and the values on their own layer. And then I've got this lighting, which is just a grayscale that I've dodged and burned, and then I've used linear light as the blend mode so that it adds it on top of the base color. So that way it's really easy if I want to change the color value of something and make it darker, or if I want to change the hue, I can do that non-destructively, which I have done on this texture already. So you can see my different variations here. I've got like a less saturated wall, a more saturated wall, just to like feel it out. And I don't have to like repaint it by hand sort of thing. I can just change the colors and the values and have that detail and the trim and like the bezels and everything are just independent of it, which is really cool in my opinion. So I've got this sort of dodge and burn layer, and then I've got this layer of highlights that I've drawn in just with the white pen tool. Literally just the brush tool. I went and did that with a tablet. And then I've got this overlay, which is literally just the fibers of Photoshop filter. And then I've got this, which is, I think this is set to hard light. And then I just take a brush and draw in the creases by hand, in hard light mode. And I use like opacity to then make these creases like that. And then I just add, if I want more, I just blend in more with opacity, like that. And that's basically what I did for those sorts of little details. And that's how I was looking at a lot of forum posts to find like texturing techniques from the 2000s, and that's sort of how they do things as well. And then you add them all together with the color, and boom, you have a 256 wall texture that doesn't need a normal map, that doesn't need subsurface whatever. It doesn't need a freaking tessellation map or whatever. It doesn't need any of that. It's just, boom, there you go. And then you just put it in the game, and it looks nice. And then I basically just did that for the others. So there's a few things I still need to make, and that's trim sheets, because I don't really have any good ones. But that is sort of, well, I'll get into that in a moment. But yeah, you can see for the roof as well, I've got this nice sort of metal, I'll show you it in Photoshop. This is the one I was just working on. I've got this sort of roof texture. And this literally, it's done with the same techniques, but I've just used the shape tool in Photoshop for these little rectangles here. Now, there might be a better way to do this, and I'm welcome to suggestions, because I've noticed that I was looking at Unreal Tournament, I was looking at Sonic 06, and another game. I noticed that for their metal textures, they have this exact shape in like all of their metal, and I have to believe that there is some like Photoshop brush or something that just has this shape, because I keep seeing it and noticing it everywhere, and it's like, I didn't know what it was, so I just used the box tool and rounded the corners, and then I just added emboss. I just added the emboss to it and then set the blend mode to overlay. And that's what I did to make those. So I didn't have to sculpt it in ZBrush. I didn't have to do any of that. I'd literally just blend modes and trickery, and I fooled you into thinking that this is now a detailed indented roof tile when it actually isn't. It's just a texture. So anyway, there's sort of my thing, and this was the one I was working on just yesterday, and this is a Mac-on trim, and it's not finished yet, but I was just getting the basics of making trims to use for like door frames and vents and things like that. So it's got like concave and convex corners, but I haven't hand done any of this yet. I've just been using the gradient tool. So it's just a rough, but it looks vaguely metallic, which is sort of what I wanted. But I want to go in and hand paint like edges, because it's meant to be used for, this is what I'm going to use for like this door frame, which doesn't have a material on it. But I'm going to use that here so that the edges of the door have the concave or the convex corner lined up to the UV so that it looks more deliberate. And in terms of the Mac-on trim, because that's from the Mac-on trim standard, which I've talked about on stream a while ago, but for those that don't remember, it's what Quake mappers, a lot of Quake mappers use it, where like they have a specific way they lay out their trim sheet so that things at a certain size are on a certain part of the texture, and it's standardized, which is really cool. And I thought, man, I love when things are standardized and not just random. So the next thing I'm going to do this afternoon is basically make my own Mac-on trim sheet like a laboratory metallic Macon trim, and then I'm going to make a custom one that has more like another one that has more like details in it. But this is going to be mainly for just surfaces, and I might use this for props and stuff as well. Because I noticed that the Macon texture packs tend to have that sort of thing. So I might even use this for like the sides of these platforms, for instance. I would use it there. It's sort of like just a trim. It's for trims that just don't need anything detailed. Like I would use it for the corners of this, for instance, which I think I've already applied it here. And then like the bottoms of this. But then for things that need more specific details, like this wall bit at the bottom, I would then make a separate texture for that, is what I would do. But the trims are mainly, the trim sheets are just sort of standardized and used for, yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool stuff. But anyway, you're really going to click out of blending options for layers. Oh, I mean, I think that's what I'm doing, unless you're talking about something else, Cybershell. Do I plan to add normal maps? No. I mean, I don't think I'll need normal maps, frankly. Like, yeah, it might look slightly better with normal maps, but I mean, if I framed the camera a certain way, if I put Gabi in here, right? And if I put Gabi in here, if I put her in a pose, and if I frame the camera just so I'll change the I'll zoom the FOV in a bit. If I arranged the shot like this and told you, and I put this on a TV, and I told you that this was a paused frame from a TV show, would you believe me? And if the answer is yes, then I don't need normal maps, I don't think. That's sort of what I reckon. Sorry, I gotta clear my throat a bit. You'd have to right-click and size bevels, gradients, and all kind of stuff. You can save them as styles. Oh, yeah, I've heard of stuff like that. Admiral would kind of believe me. Cool. All right, well, kinda is... I can do better than kinda, I think. I gotta get it better than that. Looks like Stormhawks. I don't know what that is. I'll have to look that up. Stormhawks. Oh my god, I remember this. Oh, dude. I think about this show all the time, but I forgot the name of it. Oh, man. This takes me back. I used to watch this all the time. Thank you for reminding me of the name of this show. I've been looking for this for ages, dude. I think about this like at least once a week, and I go, oh, what was that CG-looking show that I used to watch that had the guy with the red hair named Arrow? But I can't remember it's Stormhawks, that's what it was. Oh man, thanks so much. I don't know if it's just me, did anyone else watch this? This was so cool, this show. This was so awesome. And Iron Man, yeah, Iron Man Armored Adventures. I remember, I used to watch both of those. You sound like you were raised on ABC 3, Studio 3. That's what this sounds like, unless they add these in other countries. Yeah, it's the same kind of style. Actually, the environments actually aren't far off from what I'm aiming for, actually. Like, this background, if it wasn't for the fact that the characters look too perfect, and like like the perfect normals, if it wasn't for that, I would think that that background is hand-drawn. Or hand-rendered. Man, this takes me back. Man, this was such a cool show. But, oh man. Anyway. But actually the backdrops, man, I gotta study this sometime. The backdrops for this show have that kind of Y2K look, don't they? Because I always, because now that I remember, I always remember that the city scenes in this, I was always kind of amazed at how low detail they were. Because the backdrops look like stock backdrops, but it works. And it's like, oh, it looks like a Google SketchUp background, but my belief is still suspended. And I don't really care that it looks like Google SketchUp. But anyway, man, thanks for reminding me that that exists. Stormhawks. Yo, the best. The GOAT. They had action figures? Wow, that's cool. Did you change the engine to use forward rendering? Yes, I did. So I don't know if that limits I mean, it probably does limit my options, but I kind of don't care. It probably limits them in a good way. And anyway, so yeah, if I was to take a screenshot of this and I like lowered the resolution down a ton, I don't know, you guys tell me, would you be tricked to low? Oh no, I don't know how to lower the resolution scale in the editor like that. But you know, I reckon if it's close enough to trick you, then I don't need bump maps or normal maps. And a lot of the games I've been studying, like Persona and those Pokemon games, I mean, they don't look like they have normal maps. And it's like, you know, why bother? As Reggie would say, if it's not fun, because making the normal maps is not going to be fun, because I don't really know how to make good normal maps. And if you're doing it, because that's the thing, the thing that I get limited by is because I'm not sculpting these in ZBrush. It means that if I want to make normal maps, I have to paint my own normal maps by hand. And I'm already having to paint the textures by hand. And it's like, if I'm already hand painting the textures, do I want to double my work for like an extra 20% benefit? And it's like, well, would it be fun to make those normal maps? And would it be fun to have the level look cool with normal maps? And it's like, well, it wouldn't be that fun because making normal maps by hand is not fun. And if it's not fun, why bother? That's sort of what I'm thinking. Like, the floor looks bumpy. The walls look bumpy. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think I need them. I don't think it'll be worth the effort to add normal maps. And if it does look flat, I could probably just make it, it's just a get good, it's a get good problem. Where it's like, oh, if it looks flat, it's because I haven't done my technique well enough in the shading. You don't need an extra normal map, I don't think. You could probably, it just means that my texture work on the diffuse is bad if it looks flat. That's what I would reckon. So it just means I gotta hand paint it better with better technique. And then it's still just one texture map that I need, which I think is I think if it comes to it, I'd rather just get better technique than needing a normal map. That's what I would rather do. Now, speaking of technique, I'll show you some of the other sites I've been looking at. So there's the Munsell color wheel. Oh, that's not the tab I wanted. There was another tab. So I've been looking at, I was reading through this. This is another thing with color theory. This is on the Valve wiki, the community wiki. And this, because they know it. And because if you've been sitting here watching me talk about color, and if your little game dev brain is thinking, you don't need to pick colors, you can just use Quixel mega scans, and you're making too much work for yourself, or whatever opinion you have. I mean, Valve thinks this is important, and you know, their level design uses this. The guys that make Valve maps understand this stuff. They understand use of color, use of value and contrast, effective color. And I read through all of this. It's like really good, insightful stuff. Looking up this sort of thing, point of focus, all of this stuff. It all matters. And it isn't, it's really annoying because like most people who I've talked to about this just dismiss it immediately and say, oh, you just go to the Unreal Marketplace and download the stylized foliage pack and you're done. And it's like, no, that's the soy way. No, you don't do it like that. You just because once you know this, it's not that hard to just pick colors, and then you can make it look cooler because then you can actually control the colors. So I've been reading a lot of that stuff, and then I was reading this, which was really fascinating. Now, I had to go in the web archive for this because the current version of this website doesn't have this page anymore. So thank you to whoever archived this this is from 2008. But you'll notice that this website, even the web design of this, uses the same rules. I don't know if you guys noticed, but even just the website colors, you notice how this is a very similar palette to my level for the website? That's pretty neat. So some guy like picked out the shade of purple and then a shade of light for the text. That's no accident either. They didn't just pick a random color. They picked a good readable color that's pleasant on the eyes. They picked just the right shade with the right value, the right brightness. They picked text that was readable. And like, that isn't an accident, okay? And look at this beautiful little footer at the bottom. I love this choice where they have the dark shade of the copyright disclaimer and then the hyperlinks having this more saturated, and then the normal text just being white. Like that's, oh man, I just really like it. And it's, when I was reading this website, I felt like I was in my laboratory level because it's using like a very similar, it's a bit more purple shifted, but it's a very similar like color scheme to my level. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. But I was reading through this guy's thing. This is an old school 3D artist from back in the day. And he's sort of talking about his modeling workflow and stuff. But the thing I found interesting was that he uses a technique. I think his name's Michael Dashow or something. I'm just looking at the URL here. But he has, Michael Dashow. So he has a technique where he actually does bake an ambient occlusion map, but he doesn't rely only on that. He then takes that into Photoshop, uses that as a base for his shadows, and then paints in color over the top. Then he does a color map and paints in like skin pigmentation, and then he uses overlay, the overlay blend mode, to then add in the wrinkles. And I thought, man, that's really cool. That's really sick. So he does all the detail in grayscale and then color maps over the top. But this guy, he can pick color better than me because he has foundational art knowledge and years more experience. So I can tell that this way works for him really well because the way he's picking, like, he even says here, this is how I know that this guy is legit, is that he says hues based on how close the blood is to the surface. So he knows that stuff because he's probably studied traditional art, and he's adding, like, wherever the skin and blood is closer together, he adds shades of red and orange to, like, under the knees and the nose and the lips. Now, I don't have that kind of knowledge. Well, I guess I do now that I've read this, but I wouldn't think to do that, which is why there's sort of a degree to which that there isn't, like, this technique works well for him because he has that prior knowledge. So I'm kind of reaching the stage now with my stuff where I know I have a sense of what prior knowledge I don't have. So I try to be more, I'm like, what technique is going to give me the bridge where it's giving me the bridge over my skipped prior knowledge that I might not know? Like, what's gonna take me to what I need to know? So for me, for instance, I might not think to use hue and color the way he does. I might pick it differently. But I'm just, it's been a process on figuring out, like, what to pick. Like, for instance, for these textures, I haven't really used color that way. I've just used shades and hues instead. It's a bit different for me, but I don't know. Reading about this sort of stuff is really cool. I don't know if is it going to let me link this in chat? Yeah, I mean, I guess it is basic color theory, but the basic color theory I've seen is even more basic than this. Like, this is basic color theory and something else working together. And I would guess anatomy knowledge of some kind and other stuff. So the thing is, because I'm not a scholar. I'm not in, like, the college, university, academia scene. So I don't really know. And I don't really have a lot of respect for the people in that scene generally. But what I do respect is people that have that and are not just in academia. Like, you can tell this guy probably actually does real models for things. He isn't just in teaching purgatory constantly. I don't know. But it looks like hard-earned wisdom. That's what this stuff looks like. Whereas a lot of the stuff I tend to see does not look hard-earned. It just looks like, ammunition for a course, and it doesn't look valuable. But this stuff looks like there's a certain discernment, or after you've seen enough stuff, you can start to pick out what is real and what isn't. Like, what is there to sell a course and what is there to teach, like, actually. And this feels like the real stuff, and everything I've seen before this point doesn't feel real. You know what I mean? It feels soy, to reuse that word. But yeah, this sort of stuff's really cool. So I don't know what else I can really say more about texturing. I think the thing I'm pretty confident with how the color choice and everything came out. I've just been messing around with post-processing a little as well. But what I want to get to next is finishing up my trims, because those are kind of the harder ones because they have to be laid out a certain way. So I want to finish up trims, and then I want to start getting into doing props using trims and that sort of thing. So things like, I did start modeling a computer terminal a few weeks back, but I had to put that down and pick up other things. But I now it's given me, now that I know what textures I'm actually going to have, it actually gives me better ideas for props. So I've already thought of ways to like remodel the ceiling to look better so that it doesn't look just like a trench broom blockout, and like to make the walls more interesting. Because this, I think, is good, but it isn't excellent. Like, this is good, but not excellent. And what would make this excellent is slightly more sophisticated use of like chamfering and prop placement, and then I think it would feel finished at that point, where it's like it isn't perfect, but it feels there's a threshold I'm searching for where it feels finished, where it's like there's a point where it's not perfectionism, because there's a line there that I'm being wary of, but it's the line of this is where I want to leave it. And that point is, I think, going to be just with a bit more sophisticated meshing. Not extreme, because again, trench broom limits you, which is good. You can't actually do it that sophisticated and that... Well, no, sophisticated isn't the word. You can't make complex things in trench broom, which is great, but you can make it sophisticated. So that's the kind of line where it's like you can make it cool and smart, but simple. And that's what, now that I've done the procedure of doing a pass of this level, because that's how I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it in passes, where it's like the first pass was just the blocking out. The second pass was the blocking out with the stock textures. This is kind of the third pass, where it's like the hand done and the color pass, where it's actually the color and texture is like there. And then the fourth pass is going to be the detail pass, or I guess you call it the meshing pass. Because this is still just blocking, really. That's why that's probably the only thing holding it back from making it look done, is that. And then after that, it would just be a lighting pass, where now that I would have props, because I know what kind of props I need, because that was a difficult thing, whereas I didn't really know what meshes to make, but now I know, where it's like, I want to have a computer terminal, I want to have a light fixture of some kind that I just repeat throughout the corridors, and I want to have certain trims, and I want to have crates that look a certain way. And that's how I know that that's right enough in terms of effort. I think more than that would be overboard, I could imagine. But it feels clairvoyant now, where it's like I know what needs to happen. Whereas I think when I was starting this, I didn't really know yet. It was just kind of experimenting. And I learned a lot through that process too, which has been really fun. So I think that's all I have to say about the lab. It's just been really fun, because it might look like he's just reskinned the environment. But man, it's actually insane the amount of thought people put into this sort of stuff. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing fully yet, but when you think about people at Valve, or people at like actual companies, like people that have actual knowledge on this stuff, man, it gives me a newfound appreciation for some of the levels, classic levels that we've seen in our time. And they really did put in thought into it, and it's really cool. Like the Black Mesa level, or even like Sonic games, I find. Because Sonic is sort of my background. I grew up playing Sonic games a lot. And when I look at the levels in like Sonic Heroes now, it doesn't look the same to me anymore, man. Like, I look at stuff like this now. What's the city level? The Metropolis. Like, when I look at this now, man, it looks so much more beautiful to me, because I know what's happening. Like, I can look at this and I know what's happening. Like, I know what's going on. Whereas a month or two ago, I would have had no clue. I'm like, what? I don't understand what they're doing, but I know that I like it, but I don't understand what it means. But now you can look at stuff like this, and it's like, that's a repeating tile, that's a repeating tile. And this has been, like, actually this building uses the color scheme I'm using. Isn't that funny? Look at it. It's like, oh, they're using the same shades, they're using the same hues for that building. And then for different buildings, they're using some other analogous palette. Like, this is all using analogous greens, analogous reds. And it's like, wow, that's pretty neat. And now, Sonic Colors is a bit more of a... Sonic Heroes, not Sonic Colors. Sonic Heroes is a very colorful game, and I don't necessarily always agree with the color choices, but I'm looking at these environments now, and it makes sense. Whereas, yeah, it just feels really cool, and there's like a newfound artistry to it that is just sick. Like, these sort of background... Like... I know how to make stuff like this now. Like, those buildings I could make. Whereas, yeah, last month, I'm like, oh, this is so stressful. How do you build buildings like that? And the way that everybody that tells me how to do it, it's always like, oh, well, you have to get Houdini or whatever and make smart meshes or whatever, like some soy solution. And it's like, well, actually, this is probably just a BSP brush with a repeating texture. And like, that's as simple as it needs to. And then someone might say, oh, but you have to have like procedural pillars that stick out. And it's like, no, you don't need that. This looks good. And, I don't know, man. It makes me really appreciate this. We had it so good, man. We had it really good back then. We had it so good. Okay. Cybershell says, I like how simple and bold everything looked. Yeah, I mean, you know what? The fact that it's on a CRT, I think, is so important, because that adds in a lot of limits. And it isn't just visual. There was something I was reading about with Halo that was similar, where the color choices for Halo had to be the certain things they did, because there was a limited resolution and limited color gamut they were using. Because some TVs, they didn't have the full RGB spectrum or whatever, something like that. So they didn't have unlimited choices. And honestly, like, because I was telling a friend about this yesterday, and he noticed that the Halo color palette for the Covenant is sort of similar to what I've got here. So if I search Halo 1 Covenant, this is sort of similar. Like, this is the example I was trying to think of earlier for how good we would have had it. Like, this stuff, man, is... Oh, look at that. It's just oozing. The cheese is oozing. And when you look at the new Halo that they're doing, man, you look at... Like, because I don't know if you guys have seen that announcement video where Halo are moving to Unreal 5. I bring this video up a lot because it's the funniest video I've ever seen. A New Dawn. And I want to just... Because this is the perfect way to wrap up this point, is showing what happens when you don't get it. And dude, these guys, man, I don't know them personally. I don't work there. But I have no confidence in them at all. I have zero confidence in their ability to do a competent game. Because the thing that they show off in this video... I don't know how many of you guys have seen this video. But it is... Oh, man. It's... It is a sign of the times, okay? That's how I see this video. It's so interesting to me because it's... This is... That soy attitude I was talking about, I can feel it oozing in every frame. Where it's like they've overproduced and overshot the video. You don't need interviews from 2 camera angles, and you don't need this frickin'... You don't need that. The frickin'... Like, did you see the Bungie guys in 2004? Did they have this pretentious camera setup where it's like, we have the dual camera and the Rembrandt lighting on every staff member? No, they just filmed it in the office like a normal person. Like, they didn't do all this... Anyway, that's not even the game. It's just the way they've shot the studio. It just annoys me. But then the actual, like, gameplay... And gameplay footage is the loose term, okay? This is not gameplay footage. But this tells me that they don't get what I've just been talking about on stream. Now, I just want to put it here that I'm not trying to put them down, and I'm not better than these guys. That's not the point. It just frustrates me that I think they would benefit from just sticking to the Halo 1 palette like this. Because the fans, and this isn't like this isn't because of what I think, is that it seems like that's what the fans of this want. And I say this as a Halo fan myself. So I don't know how many of you guys are into this sort of thing, because I don't know how many of my viewers, I don't know what the Venn diagram is between Halo fans and whoever watches me. But I played a lot of Halo. I'm not like super hardcore, and I'm not very good at it, but I really like it. At least the older games. And... just from the community response, you can tell that the players are trying to say what I'm saying, but the players don't have... The players are not going to spend like a whole week researching color theory to put this into words. They don't see that, and it's not their job. They don't have any controlling stake over this. But the players are going to bag on this and make fun of it. And that's the best they can do. And that's kind of all they need to do. The onus is on the studio to figure out why they're being made fun of for this. Because you'll notice that this is meant to be the same environment, by the way. You notice how different it feels? This is meant to be the Halo ring, and this is the Halo ring from the first game. You notice how it doesn't really even feel like Halo in the second one? Now, the studio evidently thinks, judging from what they show off in this video, they think it's superior because everything is high fidelity. And they're using Unreal 5, and they have 10 layers of parallaxing on the snow, and they think that that is automatically going to make it better. But something about this looks better, man. I can't tell you what it is. But that's because they had the limits of a CRT, and there's audio limits too, by the way. Martin O'Donnell has talked about how with the original music, he had to mix it in such a way that it sounded good on the crappy CRT speakers, because most people at the time, even now, they don't have like quality audio gear. So there was an incentive as well that's why old games sound louder. And I think you see this there was a Crowbcat video that talked about this, where they have the Resident Evil remastered versus the original, and the original audio is mixed way louder because it's meant to be on a CRT, whereas the old one is mixed for like modern stuff, and the dynamic range is higher. But there's certain types of players prefer the compressed dynamic range, because you get less choices, which is more artistic, because you get more deliberate. You can just, like, the level of loudness you can make any one thing is more deliberate because you have limited options. And it's the same with color. It's the exact same idea, where they have to make everything visually... it needs visual character, otherwise the CRT is going to butcher it. And a CRT would butcher this, probably. The thing is, though, is that it just so happens that because of that limitation... that look is now the Halo look. Like, you can't get away from that now. Like, anything that uses purple and green and this shade of blue, people are going to associate with Halo, no matter what. Even if you look at the later games, like Halo 3, that, even though that was HD, that still had this thing going on. Like, this sort of deliberate color choice with the orange and blue and the green... like, the Halo palette, it evolved a little in HD, but it still had that kind of, the Covenant especially the Covenant and the Forerunner stuff. It had this sort of purpley, otherworldly... it had that kind of Y2K look, honestly, which was funny, because that was the trending thing at the time. But this... I don't know, man, this isn't it. And I know these people think that it's better because it's 4K, but... like, I can just see history repeating itself here. Like, this is just going to be, like, Halo Infinite again, but in Unreal 5. Like, I don't think they've learned the point. And they think that it's, like... and that's the thing as well, is that the fact that this video exists is sort of a symptom. Because the reason this video exists... I think the reason this video exists at all, in my opinion, is because they're trying to affirm themselves into thinking that this is the right choice. But because what's the point of releasing this video at all? Like, why tell people this? Like, it's not a game. The guy says it's not a game, it's a research project. And it's like, who cares? The players don't care it's a research project. Talk about it when you have the game. That's sort of what I would think. Now, that might sound harsh and critical, but I mean, I don't know any Halo fan that is excited about this. And it seems very self-affirming. But maybe I'm reading too much into it. I don't know, but that's how it feels. But it feels like they're trying to get validation for getting 4K textures in Unreal 5, and that we're trying to artificially renew faith in the community because everyone just automatically thinks Unreal 5 is going to solve everything. And I think they're betting on players thinking that. And it didn't work, I don't think, because every single comment I've seen here is just clowning on them. So it's like... what will save it, though, is if they... honestly, man, I think if someone actually went and made a game that had the same level of fidelity as Halo 3 or Halo 2, that had the spirit of Halo, that was called something else, that had the gameplay loop, it'd probably do better than this. Just my game theory. That's what I reckon. But, I don't know. Halo's a really good case study. I've been looking at that as well for color. Because the original games... all of the stuff I've been yapping about for the last 2 hours, the original Halo artists... understood that stuff. They knew it, and that's why their stuff looks so great. Whereas anything after the Bungie era doesn't really have it. You know what I mean? If you've ever wondered why that is, the answer is probably the stuff I've been yapping about for the last hour. It's probably because they haven't thought about that stuff. But, you know, that's just what I reckon. And I know that I'm kind of bashing on Halo, but it's the very strong example of what I noticed what I noticed it happening in today. It's the best contemporary example I can see of when I feel like they haven't got it and they're kind of hiding behind fidelity. Now, if that ends up not being the case and it actually turns up amazing, then that's going to be awesome. I would very much love to be wrong about that. But I don't know, the overemphasis on graphical fidelity does not give me any confidence that this new thing they're doing is going to be good. This is just my opinion, though. Thanks, Gulliver. Without the iconic Halo buildings, you could easily mistake this for any other sci-fi game. I mean, yeah, that's a good point, Lemon. Like, because they had limited poly count as well, the Forerunner architecture had to be very specific. And you couldn't come up with something like that with modern software because you get too much freedom. So it's basically just limitation beats creativity. That's basically it. I don't really have to explain it more than that, really. Could I get a picture of the remastered Halo? Oh, yeah. Well, actually, yeah, that's a good point. I forgot to look at that. We'll get a picture of the Halo 1 remastered. Because that is sort of... That's when they had the... Well, the thing is with Halo Remastered is that this wasn't entirely made by 343 because they're using assets from Halo 3. So they still have the benefit of being on the shoulders of giants insofar as that they're using the assets made by Bungie just differently. But even then, that was like the first sign that they weren't going to get it. Because in retrospect, is there like... These aren't great pictures. These are all very... there's a certain image in my head I'm thinking of. Like this environment. Thanks so much, Snubbill, for gifting 1 membership to Core Quad. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. Members, by the way, make sure to have... If you have the same email for your Discord and YouTube, make sure your accounts are linked. You'll get access to the members-only Discord chat where I've shared some of my ramblings about this stuff. But like this picture and this picture, right? Like, you can kind of see what I mean, where the original game didn't have this red Dawn look to it. It had a cooler look with cooler colors. But the color really does set the impression. That's why the Halo Remaster felt so different. And all the stuff I was talking about with my textures of picking the right, not just the right hue, but the right value and the right vibrance. And you know how when the Halo got remastered and everything looked too bright? That's what happens when you don't get it right, is that the mood is gone. Like, what was the Halo, the library remastered or something? Like in the level, the library, I think it was, where in the original, it's very moody, but in the remastered, it's like overlit. And it's like, you don't need the torch anymore. I remember Martin O'Donnell had like this big rant about that because it changed the game design or something, where it's like he wanted people to use the flashlight on purpose, but the remaster made the torch useless because everything was lit too well. Like this sort of thing. How everything is very bright. And you actually notice this is using trim sheets too. It's using the same techniques. And this is probably very low res still. This is probably a 256 texture. But, you know, it's like... But the original game used different values and different hues. And that's why I've been kind of going down that rabbit hole at all, is because I subconsciously noticed it from Halo and went, I don't want to make the same mistake and unintentionally create the wrong vibe, which is what the previous iterations of the lab had done. I had unintentionally made the wrong vibe. So I'm hoping that this time, with the colors alone and the brightness... So there's 3 things: the hue, the value, and the vibrance. I think, did I use hue, brightness, vibrance? That's right. To make sure that that's in harmony with each other. Because when you don't do that right, you get the Halo 1 remaster that looks like a 2011 game. Like, it's now stuck with the dated 2011 look. And you don't want that, if you can help it. So that's kind of that's probably a deep reason why I even care about this at all, because I remember playing this when it came out and I didn't know how to put it into words because I was still in the I was still in the, I wasn't a game dev, you know? I only knew what the gamers knew, but I knew something was wrong, and I couldn't describe it. Like, you see what I mean here, where everything looks too bright. Like, that's the kind of stuff I'm trying to avoid happening. That's a AAA example of what I'm trying to talk about here. Because it really does change the vibe of the whole game. And I'm sort of done with the whole idea that higher fidelity is gonna matters. Like, the fact that if I make everything detailed, it'll be good. Like, no. I think if I just get in the mood and like the bare minimum fidelity, but the right atmosphere, that seems to be the right option of what to do. Now, I've got about another 30 minutes left, so I'll go quickly on to another topic. Because I have been working more on the video as well. I'll get Premiere open and show you how that's sort of going. I'll see what some of you have to say about that, though. Because I don't know how many of you guys have played Halo. I don't know what the overlap is between Halo fans and my audience. So I have no idea if any of that resonates with you, but I tend to pay attention to the Halo scene when I can, because, I don't know, it just has a lot of good examples of that happening in a big company, which I find kind of humorous that even Microsoft can't quite get it right. But it kind of makes you think, if even they can't get it right, then it means that it is kind of hard, which I don't doubt. So it's not that I'm trying to clown on them and say that they're incompetent. It's more that it's harder than people realize, and it actually takes a lot more effort than you think to pick the right thing. So yeah, it's so hard that even Microsoft's artists can't do it. But I think I don't know, I have a sense that the reason they haven't done it is more a confidence thing than anything else. But I can't really explain it too well yet. I'm still having that thought sit in my head. So I'm just trying to open my Premiere project. Because speaking of craftsmanship and artistry, I've got the devlog. I'm just trying to find the folder for it. Oh, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the name. Says, real life is boring. I mean, yes. I think Gabe Newell said that as well, didn't he? Where it's like, games shouldn't be trying to emulate real life all the time. It should be, if you want to go to real life, just go outside type thing. It's like, I want to have fun. That's sort of the Gabe Newell attitude. So he took that in a gameplay direction, but I think it applies to art as well. Because it's like, actually, there was a better quote for this that summarizes that point. Let me just, real quick, I just got to remember to open a certain project file, and then I'll finish my point. Because there is somebody that put this into words really well. It's just on the tip of my tongue, but I just got to open the devlog file. Who was it? Terry Davis said this. The God's Chosen Programmer said this. He said, what was it? It was like, you could aim for realism, but what if you want better than real? And that was like the most concise way of looking at it I've ever heard. And I thought, that is such a great yes. Like, that is such a great, succinct way of putting it. It's like, you could aim for realism, or you could aim for better than realism. What about an elephant with blue eyes? That's sort of how, because he has his little elephant render. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, I got to reference King Terry here for a sec. This guy, man, his story is so fascinating, but he had this, I've been thinking about this picture a lot lately. So this guy, I'll give like the quick Spark Notes version. This dude made his an operating system from scratch. He made the operating system and a 64-bit compiler and all the games for it and the graphics engine and whatever from scratch. He spent like 10 years on it or 20 years on it. And there's this picture that he makes in his operating system. And this is such a cool picture because it isn't the fact that he's just made this in MS Paint or something. He's made this in his own program, in his own operating system. But there's this phrase that he has here that is so, oh man, like I know that you might look at this and laugh, but this is so real. Okay, he says this is 16 color, pleasant to create. It would be unpleasant to draw with 16,777,216 colors. And that's so real. It's true. It would be unpleasant to draw with 16 million colors. Look how much fun you can have with 16 colors. And that's what he says when he says better than real. That's what he's talking about. You could go through hell and make like a realistic elephant, or you could have pleasant to create and do, you know, better than real and have an elephant. So I don't know. I've been thinking about this image just a lot in the last week. I think I've just had that image in my head. And I'm like, I have to, if I want to get feline finished, man, I have to do the pleasant to create. I can't do this soy realism. I have to do like, you know, what's the pleasant to create version? You know, that's how I think. It's like whenever I'm doing anything that's more complicated than the elephant, that's how I know I'm going into the wrong timeline. That's how it feels. The elephant doesn't need RTX. That's right, indeed. But yeah, Terry has a lot of good quotes. Really cool. I recommend looking him up if you don't know who he is. But yeah, he was an actual... Yeah, he was, as Imp's Sleepy Strings put it, he had divine intellect. And, you know, people say that he was schizophrenic or something. But I don't know, man. I think Terry was cooking. We just didn't quite get it. He was too far ahead of his time. But I think about stuff he says a lot, and it's like... You know, some of the time he actually is very lucid and like it makes complete sense. But I'm completely convinced that his intellect was divine, unironically. I think he had something. He was onto something. Now, on the topic of other similarly related stuff, even this image I'm using from Arc System Works in my video, this has better than real. It has 16 color or whatever. This is probably a bit more than 16. But it has, that's why this looks so good. Is that this isn't done with 10 shades like a Vroid character. And I have a whole rant about that I want to save for a video with how I see most games do cell shading and this. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is because part of the thing I've been busy this week with as well is doing more work on this video. And it's been I keep saying it's been a tough video. It doesn't really get any easier, but I've been working through it a section at a time. I've just done the bit where I talk about normal map editing and stuff, and about facial rigging and stuff, because this was like the most complicated part of the video, because I have to explain with Gabi's model. Oh, say hi to Gabi, by the way, guys. Gabi's on screen. Because I had this whole bit, because the part of this video, the point of this video is to talk about Gabi's model and how I built it. The animations are going to be its own video, though. This is just the modeling part. But the thing that's so tricky is that there's a lot of hidden tricks with the modeling. And I try to have some graphics on screen and some time-lapse footage describing how I did some of this. And the face is kind of the prime example of, like, understanding deliberately using polygons and not overdoing it. And, you know, because before I definitely used, on Gabi's old face, I used way too many polys for no reason. And that's sort of it's the same thing with what we've been talking about with color. Gabi's head in the original model used way too many polygons. This actually uses a bit less, but it uses them smarter, and it looks better as a result. Now, I'm just using examples from Guilty Gear to show what I mean, and I'm showing, like, the intentional shading and stuff. I'm showing, like, other weird little glitches that happen. But you see how just the impression holds up better? So that's what's really interesting is the more I've been working on this video and making the level at the same time, I've noticed that a lot of the concepts that make these things cool are the same, even though it's two completely different subjects. We've got the character model and then a level, which might seem completely unrelated, but the actual magic source that makes this look cool is the same magic source. And I think this is going to be the first video. This is going to be something that I want to go into in more videos, but I think the reason why this video has been hard to work on is that this is probably the first devlog I've made where I've actually been fully tuned in to that magic source, and I'm trying to explain it in a video in an applicable, in practice, not just in an abstract sense. And it's difficult to describe because the character was very complicated, but I don't know, there's an element beyond just what you see that is cool. And I'm trying to figure out how to capture the essence of that in the whole video to make it interesting. So I'm just going over bits of technical stuff, but I'm trying to make sure the technicals aren't too long. and taking up too much of the video. So I'm still having to trim out some things, but the tricky part was this whole chapter about the facial topology. It took me like a week to figure out how to explain what I was talking about. And I had like 5 or 6 versions, but I think I finally reached the point now where I've got this little chapter and I literally explain it in 3 minutes, which is pretty good. I'm pretty proud of that, because in my original recording, I spent like 10 minutes explaining it, which felt too long. And it's like, can I get this down to like 3 minutes to explain this? Because this isn't really the most interesting. Like, if you don't know 3D modeling, it's not really going to make sense. So I'm trying to make it interesting to someone who doesn't really, is not a 3D modeler, just because they think that the thought put into it is cool. But it's still, if you are a 3D modeler, you can kind of follow along. But it's to reach that middle ground is really complicated. Because, you know, I don't want to make like a hyper niche specific video that only 200 people watch. So there's a degree to which you have to like balance technical detail and just summarizing stuff up. So I've been working more on that stuff. But I've been, again, just kind of juggling a bunch of other stuff. I've been really more interested in the color theory stuff this week, so I've been putting most of my effort there. But I'm working on it. I was hoping that this video would be kind of done in the next, by now, but it's kind of ended up being a more complicated video than I thought. So I still have like an hour left. And I'm trying to trim as much of this out as possible, because a lot of this probably isn't necessary. So it's just a balancing act of reordering the chapters around, cutting the fat more, finding out what's important to keep and what isn't. And then hopefully when it is done, it'll be a good video. So, was the nose painted or outlined? I think it was both. So Gabi's nose, there is a painted in shadow and there is a polygonal outline drawn on it. Now the thing is, that's the kind of thing, like that little thing there, that's the kind of stuff I have to keep an eye on of like, is that worth mentioning in a video like this? Because I don't actually, in the video so far, I actually don't explain that. I explain the general concept, but I don't actually say, oh, and then I modeled in this part of the nose and this part of the whatever. Like, I don't actually say that. But I do have bits that are similar to that, and it's like the question of, does that need to be mentioned? Like, does that need to be necessary, a part of the video to like explain it? Because there's a lot of nuance to how I've done everything, like how I modeled the eyelashes and the shape I chose for them, and how I did the eyebrows and how I attached them and whatever. And like, there's a bunch of stuff I could talk about, but it's like, is it interesting enough to justify airtime? Like, do people really care that this is modeled with a line? Or do people care that this is a perfect circle? Or do people care that... Like, that's the thing I got to keep an eye on, right? Of, like, how much of the stuff that doesn't matter is going to make it in and not. And you have to sort of set a bar and gatekeep certain things. Like, you can't let in everything on the video, because then it's just going to be too uninteresting. So it's like... The thing I'm stuck on now is the UVing stuff. Because... for some of this to make sense, you have to understand how it was UV'd. And that is a hard thing to explain because it's so particular and unusual. And like, someone that doesn't do 3D modeling probably doesn't even know what unwrapping is. And someone who does know what UV wrapping is probably going to have a tantrum when they look at how this is done, because it isn't done the right way. But this is done the right way for Gabi, which is not the conventional way. So there's this balancing act of like not over-explaining it, but not under-explaining it. So the bit I'm going to be focusing on next is the UVs and texturing, and explaining how it was that, you know, why this was the better way to do it for this case. Because this isn't how you should do it. This is not how you should do it normally. That's the important thing. But it's how it has to be done for Gabi. And I don't know. It's just because I already know it. So I don't know what it's like for someone that doesn't know this. I don't know how it sounds to someone else. So it's very critical. It's a very critical process of trying to pretend that I don't know what this means and sussing out whether it's too much or not. And it's just difficult. Safex says, I was just asking about unwrapping as you were passing through. I mean, yeah, I mean, because that's the thing is because I try to not talk to a lot of 3D artists typically, because I usually just get into arguments with them. And I'd rather spend time just modeling and not talking about it. But this is a very important video, and it's about more than just the modeling. And it's also, I have to keep the devlog series going. So it serves more purposes than just being a 3D art resource. And if you really want to learn this, you don't watch a YouTube video. You go and read the actual talks if you actually want to know it. So the main thing I got to keep in mind is remembering what is relevant to the story. And what is the story about? And the story isn't really about... It's about a part of the techniques, but it isn't about the techniques themselves. And that's the thing that's tricky, is that it's about the attitude rather than, and then I used this technique to model the shoulder or some trivial thing that doesn't matter. So that's the thing I got to keep an eye on, is that there are bits where there's a bit of technical stuff showing that demonstrates the attitude. But if there's something that doesn't demonstrate the attitude, then I cut it out because it's not really serving a purpose. So that's, yeah. But for other 3D artists, because I don't know how other 3D artists think, because I don't talk to them a lot, and I don't really, because I know that they're going to watch it, and it's just like, how do I make it make sense to those people and the average person? And, not have it be boring, because it's really tough. Because I don't know how, even people that watch the streams, I have no idea what you guys have been taught about how to do stuff like this. I don't know what most people think how you're supposed to do UV mapping or whatever. Like, I don't know the general status quo. Like, because I don't really think about modern modeling stuff anymore. And the reason I know this is because when I look at YouTube tutorials made recently about how to low poly character tutorial or whatever, the quality is usually way inferior to the stuff I saw from like 2008. Like that web page I had before, I don't know if I still have it open. The web page I had from that dude's blog, wherever it was, this guy, like, this is stuff I understand, but this is like the stuff I see now on YouTube is like not this. And look, it's just because, I don't know, maybe I'm just old or whatever, I don't know, but it's like, I feel like my frame of reference is different. So I feel like that there's probably going to be things I say that don't make sense. And I'm trying to like preemptively counteract that and make sure I don't mess it up. But it's hard. Because it's... Admiral says I've been taught basically nothing. You can make a spring. Well, yeah, because then there's a kid I know who is like learning Blender at the moment, and he's doing it through like the Blender Guru stuff, and then you like learn how to make a donut or something. But the stuff I'm talking about is so not that. You know what I mean? Like, this is way different from the making a donut. And I don't just mean that it's more complicated. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's that, like, it's the attitude of making it is completely different. And the technique is completely different. And even the purpose of making it is completely different. Because most people they make a donut to play around. But I'm making Gabi for a specific reason, to solve certain problems, and it has certain technical things. And I don't know, just most of the stuff I see on YouTube about Blender, it's not purpose-built. Like, it's just novel, and it's like, oh, look how I made this shader. But they don't, like, have a purpose for it. It's just cool. But it's not, like, it's a completely different world when you're making something for a reason versus just making it because you're bored. And I've noticed that a lot of, like, Blender content, it's just people that are bored. That's what I've noticed. It's like, they're just doing it because they're bored and they need to fill their time with some hobby, and they pick 3D modeling. But they don't have an intention to use the model for something, which changes the rules. Like, that changes the way you even approach the task is completely different when you actually have a purpose and a goal. So it's like, I know that that's an element to it that is probably going to make this not relatable to people that are just messing around with donuts. But it's like, do I want, like, should it make sense to those people? I don't know. Because I don't know. It's just... Maybe I'm too much in my own head about it. I don't know. Could be. but I'm trying to make sure that amidst all the technical detail is that the purity of the story stays intact. Because what the story is really about, it's about the deliberate way I went about making the model against everyone's advice. And that was probably the hardest thing. So I got to remember that that's kind of the point, where it's like I went against every conventional thing, every conventional technique, and everyone was like yelling at me about it constantly. But I did it, and the result was sick. And that's kind of the point of the story. So I'm trying to keep in bits that support that, where you like when I'm doing the face and stuff, where you look at, because this is where I remember feeling that, where it's like when I did Gabi's face and I modeled in triangles like this, I remember I got yelled at so much over this. Everyone had such a tantrum over this because they were like, no, you can't model faces like that. You're going to have problems with the rig if you do it like that. Even though, like, if you know what you're doing, you won't have problems. And I didn't have problems. But, like, most people I see that just watch YouTube videos and, like, don't try this for themselves, they think that the minute you deviate from a Blender donut tutorial, then you're doing it wrong or something. I don't know. There's like a certain... I don't know, like they have very strong opinions on the way you're supposed to do it or whatever. So it's like part of it is like undoing that kind of conditioning, because that's what I had to do to myself. I had to unlearn all this stuff so that I could learn it the way I needed to. So I could do stuff like this and have it be above average, which is, yeah. So I'm still trying to work out like how to communicate that across in the fabric of the video, as I show how I did stuff and the types of problems that I had, and not lose the forest for the trees with the technicals. It's difficult stuff, but I'm working as hard as I can on it. I'm getting through it. One question about the upcoming devlog: how many cameras? A good question. I can check that for you, I think. You mean for the time lapse? Actually, I think I might be able to remember. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cameras I think I used to record the time lapse. So that I had a camera going around Gabi as I was modeling her, like in a 360 turntable. I had a camera from like a 3/4 angle from the front and another from the back. And then I had a camera from the very front and from the side. And then I had a camera for the desktop, recording the desktop. So that's how I recorded it. The time-lapse footage actually didn't come out as smooth as I was hoping, because I was using some plugin for it, but it's kind of too late now, so too bad. So it's a bit choppy, but it'll do. Please give me advice, says xvoxel. How do you do the rigging without going mentally insane and getting burnout? Well, those are kind of two questions, because you will get mentally insane and burnout from doing anything, not just rigging. Because the thing is, because I know that this is the sort of question I know I'm probably going to get in this video. I'm probably going to have people that think that, because there is no real answer to that question, unfortunately. It depends. Like, I'm sorry. It just depends. I'm trying to, because I know that's a lame answer. I'm trying to think of a better answer for you. But it depends on what you're rigging and how. Because I think the type of answer people are looking for is the answer where you get a free plugin that solves the problem, which is not the nature of solution that I like. I'm just trying to think more harder, because it's actually kind of complicated, but the way to not get burnout from rigging is to spend less time doing the rigging. That's how I found. If you're getting burnout from rigging, it's probably because you're spending too much time on it, and you're probably spending too much time on it because the foundations of your model are weak. And I know that I'm not trying to be mean, but I've made this mistake myself. Like, Gabi's foundations were weak for her old model, and I got into hell rigging and weight painting her, as you can see in this footage. And the way I got out of that The thing is, you can't, if you're at the stage where you're having that problem in rigging, and if it's for the reasons I think you're having those problems, where you're having the problems because you have to meticulously weight paint everything, and when you weight paint one part, it undoes the weights on something else, and it's like, if that's the kind of burnout you're talking about, which I think it is, because that's the kind of burnout that I tend to have with rigging, the solution is to make the model from the beginning in such a way where you end up not having those problems at all. But you can't solve, if you're already rigging, it's too late. You can't really solve that problem unless you start over. And that's what I had to do for Gabi. Because even when I was there rigging her body and her mouth and her legs, it was hell and it was burnout, but I just kind of suffered through it. Because I'm like, well, I don't have a choice. I have to finish it. And I suffered. And there is no way, if that's you, then there is no way to avoid burnout. You just have to suck it up. But if you're smart, and this is the thing, is that the real solution you can't do the first time if you're a new rigger. I don't know what level of experience you're at. But if this is your first rig, you cannot do it the right way first. You just can't, because you won't get it. You won't understand why it's the right way until you do it the wrong way. Now, in my case, the reason I was able to avoid rigging hell the second time is because I had been through hell the first time and understood hell. I understood what hell really meant and what it felt like. And then I was able to think things out better. And because the thing that's tricky is that the solution is not in the rigging, it's in like 3 different things. So you have to do like 3 things correctly, and that's like the placement of bones, the topology itself, and I think that actually that might just be it. It's like you have to before even rigging, place the bones properly, which people think they know how to do, but it's actually not that intuitive unless you've studied anatomy. But even then, you have to make adjustments for 3D. So you have to have the right bone placement first, which you can't fix if you've already started rigging it. And then you have to like model the topology correctly to allow for deforms. And then you will not have rigging problems. But you solve that by modeling, not by rigging. But if that isn't you, and if you're already at rigging, then you can either... It's probably better to just finish it off and just pay attention to the burnout and hell and remember it and savor the experience for the future. And then for your next thing, then try a more thought out, considered approach. So I'm just scrubbing through my timeline here because some of these visuals I show in my video are kind of relevant to what I'm trying to say, where I talk, because this is me learning that stuff in the video, where I'm learning that with her old model, I had all this hell with rigging for these reasons. And this is, I read this whole thing and learnt it properly, and then I did it the right way the second time, and it was easier. So that the circumstances for hell and burnout don't happen. That's the winning strategy, where it's like you do it in such a meticulous way that the circumstances for burning out just don't come up. But you can't do that the first time. You have to suffer and earn that privilege by being burned by the coals first. That's what you have to do. There's no shortcut around that. You have to suffer first, and then you become enlightened. You get Terry Davis divine intellect after you've suffered. Because otherwise it's not earned wisdom and it's useless. And I know that that's the case because I used to borrow wisdom from people all the time to try and avoid pain, and it didn't work. Because then because if you don't earn that wisdom yourself, you pay for it somehow. And I paid for it a lot. And I'm not talking about in money. I mean, like, there is a cost in effort and spiritual suffering and all that stuff. That's what I'm talking about. So so when I did Gabi the second time, that's kind of where I redeemed, and I took the suffering from her first model and transmuted it into wisdom, so that the second model wouldn't be as hell. Now, there was still some tough areas to this. I still suffered a lot making the second one, but it was the right suffering. Like you can't really avoid it at the end of the day, but there is a right way to suffer, I think. And the right way this time, it felt right because I was learning and I wasn't dreading it. Like, I was suffering, and I was like, man, this is hard, but I didn't lose any enthusiasm, which is how I know that that was the right way. Whereas I think with our first model, especially around the rigging, I was losing enthusiasm. But just because I had the pressure of, I need to make this game, that's kind of the only reason I finished it, was because I had external pressure. But that's not most of you, I don't think. If you're a hobbyist, you don't have people begging you every week for the game to come out. So if that isn't you, then you're not going to have that pressure. And for people that don't have that, it's way easier to just stop, which is, I'm guessing, what's happened to you maybe. So I know that's a long answer, but there isn't simple answers to these sorts of questions, unfortunately. But yeah, the solution is to just, if you're in rigging now, just eat it up, just sweat it out and finish it. Next time, though, like while you're there sweating it, be fully present in what you're doing. Don't watch freaking the H3 podcast while you're doing it or whatever. Pay attention to the suffering and relish in it, and really get familiar with the feeling of the burnout so that you are innately familiar with what you will be avoiding the next time. And then, if you pay attention to where it went wrong, like in my case, my little areas where I figured out, it was mainly in knee joints and the mouth and stuff, where I noticed that I was having a tough time weight painting knees because of how I made them. I need to record footage for the knee still. That's the one bit I don't have. I meant to have a clip in here somewhere where I bend Gabi's old knee to show the bad deforming, and I don't have the footage for it yet. But that's where I learnt, because I was paying attention that it was hell, that's where I remembered that, oh, I shouldn't topologize knees like this, because the last time I did it, I spent like a freaking day, weight painting with my mouse, getting in the red on like this part of the knee, and it kept folding into the thigh. And it's like, that's how I recognized hell. And then I kind of had that eureka moment the second time where I saw other examples of how other people do knee joint bending. And then I tried it myself, and I was like, oh, wait, this is brilliant. So you can see with her new knees, they're a bit more purpose-built this time, and they have topology that's better suited for deforming joints. So, but that's not a thing I fix in rigging. That's a thing I plan for in advance with modeling. So that's part of the tricky thing, because I know I'm going to get heaps of questions like that on this video. And the answer is never that straightforward, because you basically have to do every part of the model correctly to not have those problems. Because there is not a rigging solution. It's that you have to do the entire procedure from the beginning correct. And then you don't have rigging. Like, you have to do the modeling correct to get no rigging problems, which is not what I used to think of. I used to think that you could solve rigging with rigging, but no, you have to solve it with the thing that comes. All of the parts of the model like interlink on each other, which is, I don't really know how to explain very well yet, but that's something I learned reading through the Arc System Works presentations, was that all of it is interlinked, and you have to like plan ahead while you're doing it, which is why I keep saying you can't really do it for your first attempt, because you don't have any experience of your own in the parts that you have to plan for. So anyway, a very long answer, but to answer the original question, how do you avoid skinning burnout when rigging? You just, you sweat it out, you finish what you're working on, and then next time take the lessons and plan ahead and get see if you can make the topology and bone placement better. Yeah, cyber shell. Yeah, that's right. You have to keep repeating that's basically me. As I've been making this video, I've been just, I've been looking at my little editing timeline, doing the 1,000-yard stare, going interlinked, pretty much. Mr. Backslash says, every part of the 3D model process informs each other. Yes, that's a much better way of putting it. The problem in the beginning have consequences. That's right. And I think that's what makes it, that's precisely why you can't get it right the first time, because you have not experienced the consequences. So it's impossible. You just can't do it. You can't balance, you can't, what was the word you used? You can't perceive the consequences that you haven't lived yet. So yeah, it's You have to kind of just suffer. You have to just go through it, know the consequences, and then prepare the next time. It's an iterative thing. But yeah. Have I considered going from visual scripting for hire to C++? I've considered it, but I just have too much to do for that to be worth my time. I know that it's the better option, but I have, if my only job was programming, then I would consider it. But I have like a million other things to do. So I accept that, I just accept that my code is going to be limited by blueprints and just be okay with that. And I know that programmers are probably going to have a tantrum hearing that, saying that I'm wrong, but I don't care. Like, most programmers are only, I don't expect them to get it because they're only programmers and they don't have to do everything else. And it's not that I'm complaining. I want to do everything. And as I've seen from experience, it's better that I do everything. But because it's like comparing an instrument, like a member of a band, like a trombone player, to a soloist or something. Where for me, I'm willing to accept sacrifices like my code not being in C++, even though it's superior, because I take that compromise, but in return, I have time to work on everything else and make that really cool. I get to make the 3D models the way I want them. I get the look I want. And that a programmer can't do that. A programmer can't do this. So yes, a programmer would be able to write all my code better than me, probably. I mean, well, that's the thing, is that my experience has told me that that's not even true either, which is, I hate that that's the case, because I did try to get someone that was a programmer to do stuff, and it was worse than my stuff. And I'm not even a programmer. Like, I don't have any training in programming at all. I'm entirely self-taught programming. I'm not even supposed to know programming. And I've seen my code look neater than actual programmers. So I don't know, man. Like, I just have to kind of make my own choices there. And I'm fine with the compromise of not it being in C++. I'm happy to accept that if it means that I get to do the rest of it the way I want. But maybe, you know, if it ends up being so good that I can make a game again and do the next project, then if I'm building on top of everything I'm doing now as a foundation, then that might afford the opportunity for me to then go more seriously in on the coding side. Like, if I was to do a second Project Feline game, now I'm not saying this will happen, don't get excited, I'm just hypothesizing, if hypothetically, you know, we did this second game, like, let's say Project Feline is a massive success, which we don't know, let's say it is, and then I make another one. If that was the case and I was just making an incrementally better game that had maybe different theming with a lot of the same mechanics, but building on top of that instead of starting from zero, in that circumstances, that to me seems like a better set of circumstances to start considering those sorts of things about making the code perfect, because you've got a foundation already. Whereas for now, that's not the case, because all the systems I'm building for, like, the way that the gameplay, like spawning enemies and keeping track of score and Gabi's movement, like, that's all from scratch. But if I was, like, doing it again where I already had those working and it was already designed and I wasn't figuring out what was a good mechanic, if I already knew the answers to those questions, then yeah, you would have more time to then go more seriously and be pedantic about how it's coded. And that would be something I would like to look at. But again, that's in the future. That's not a thing worth entertaining at the moment, because we have no idea what's going to happen. But if that set of circumstances came about, that's when I would consider C++ a priority. Because then you have a cool selling point for the sequel where it's like the game now runs way better. Because instead of having to do everything from scratch, I could just use the same models and maybe, you know, I know the same techniques, and I wouldn't have to make Gabi's model again or something. Like, that would save a lot of time, and you could use that time to, you know, redo the code base to something more maintainable. Because that's the thing, is that I'm not trying to say that I don't see the value in C++. I absolutely see the value in it, and that it would be superior, and it would be more maintainable. But it isn't, it's cancelled out if you have an incompetent programmer. If you have someone that doesn't know what they're doing, then that is not, making it in C++ is just going to waste time. And what I mean by that is that I'm not a master level programmer. So I know that I will probably screw it up. And it's like, you have to have that level of honesty with yourself where you're like, Raymond, you could become a master at this, but realistically, man, do you really think you're going to be able to do that and the 10 other stuff? And I'm like, well, no. Like, you have to just, Now, the Messiah, however, I know everyone likes to say I'm the Messiah, but the real Messiah would have the power to do that. But that's not me. That's why I keep telling you guys that I'm not the Lisan al-Gaib. The real one, with the real divine intellect, would be able to do all of that. And they probably would have already done it before. Like Terry Davis or someone. He seems more like that. He fits that archetype. But that's not me. I'm just literally... I'm nobody, okay? So I have to like have that into my decision process where it's like, me as a nobody, what realistically could I get away with compromising on? Because you do have to make those compromises. So yeah, that's just sort of how it is. But yeah, at some point it would be cool to look at, but the circumstances are not ideal for me to go down that road. Anyway, guys, I gotta get going. It is 12 something. It's noon. So I gotta eat, and then I got some stuff I gotta work on. So I appreciate you joining me for another stream. We did it a bit later today, so I apologize for the change in schedule. How was that schedule, though? Because how many people showed up? If more people showed up when I did it later in the day, maybe I'll make this my new time. We'll see. It says I've got 140, so that's actually pretty good. I don't know, you guys let me know. Well, maybe on Discord, message the Discord server and tell me if you preferred this slightly delayed schedule stream or something like that. Because I don't want to... Because I'm always anxious that I'm like, am I picking the right time for my stream or something? So I never really know. But yeah, let me know that in like the Discord server or something. And I will see you next week. Hopefully I'll have some more cool stuff to show by then. And looking forward to show you guys that stuff. And take care, guys. Have fun deving. Have a fun weekend or whatever it is you're up to. And I'll see you next week for more goodness.